Hi, I'm Dr. Anika Hoybjerg,
And I'm Casey Barron.
and we are the authors of the MOTAS and the Loop. And we're going to go over just a quick overview of what both of these materials contain and how you can utilize them in your practice. So first, we'll just give a quick little introduction. I'm Dr. Hoybjerg. I was originally a school psychologist, and I worked in the schools for a long time, implementing a lot of assessments. And then I found the field of behavior analysis, fell in love with it, and became a BCBA. I now own a center in Draper, Utah, where we provide ABA therapy, and we've been doing that since 2013.
And I am Casey. I've been a BCBA for almost 5 years now, but I've been working in ABA for a total of 10. Prior to ABA, I was doing respite care with individuals with disabilities and volunteering in a neuropsychology research lab, helping run some of their testing and compiling their data for them.
So, because of that and all of our combined experience, we knew that there was a gap in the field that needed to be addressed. And so we decided to develop a whole new assessment. So, it contains different components, which are the loop, which is structured interviews, the MOTAS, and then also the scoring booklet. So, we'll go through all those for you.
Hey, so when we were writing the MOTAS, we wanted to make sure that we collaborated with professionals from a variety of different fields to ensure each domain was comprehensive. So we worked with speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, developmental psychologists, a literacy specialist, many behavior analysts, and autistic advocates. And the first part of this process is the loop, which stands for levels of optimum performance. The loop is a set of interviews that is used to help inform the treatment process. So there's the standard loop, which is designed to be used with parents and caregivers, and the loop C that was developed in collaboration with individuals on the autism spectrum, and it's meant to be used with the client themselves so they can be part of their own treatment. And then we also have the loop P, which is meant to be used with other professionals who might be on the treatment team, like teachers, SLPs, OTs, to make sure everyone is on the same page. So each area from the MOTAS is assessed in the loop. So there are questions that go along with each of the domains. So it's intended to provide information that will be used when you move on to the assessment. You don't need to complete all the areas of the interview if they're not applicable. So each interview is going to be completely individualized to the client. So there's just some examples this is all 20 of them listed out here. A couple of them that stand out that we really like are communication and self-awareness, perspective taking, and relationships. Here is an example of the communication section of the loop for the parent or the caregiver. So you'll go through, ask each of the questions, then you can see at the bottom there is a scale. So 1 being not very important and 10 being very important. So after you go through, you can ask them, how important is this for you to work on at this time? And they can let you know. And at the end of the loop, there is a table that will compile all the levels of importance scores so you can compare those really easily, which will help you decide which areas to assess when you move on to the MOTAS. The next interview is the loop C, which is meant to be used to interview the client themselves and ensure that they're part of their own treatment. The loop C interview was written in collaboration with many individuals on the autism spectrum. They provided feedback on different ways to phrase questions and gave suggestions on how to modify the interview to make sure that it's comfortable for the individual that you are interviewing. So here's an example of some of those questions from the self-awareness section. You'll notice the scale again at the bottom where the client can share the level of importance for the section so they can tell you how important it is for them to work on those skills at this time. And again, after the loop C, there's a levels of importance table, so you can transfer all of those scores, put them in one spot, and it'll be really easy to compare what areas are the most important to focus on immediately. And this is the loop P. So this is the one that's designed to be used for other professionals such as SLPs, OTs, teachers. This can be done as an in-person interview, but it also includes instructions for the professional. So if you just want to give it to them, send it to them, have them fill it out in their own time and give it back to you, you can do that and they can do it in their own time. Okay, so after you complete the loop interviews, you're going to use that information along with your clinical judgment to create a treatment plan, do your assessment, and then work on the goals that you've selected for a predetermined amount of time. So after that time is up, you're going to want to come back and check in with everyone and see how things are going. So that's where the staying in the loop comes in. It's a shorter interview so that you can see where things are at, where we're making progress, maybe where we're stuck. Are there any goals that need to be changed at this time? And then that scale is provided again, so you can say, is this area still really important to work on, or is it not as important now because things change? Okay, and at the end of the loop, we also have the maladaptive behavior table. This can be used to help gather information on any behaviors that are occurring that are interfering with the individual's ability to be safe, might prevent them from participating in family events or gatherings, making friends, or otherwise just creating a barrier in different environments. So for each of the behaviors that is occurring, you're going to give a score on both the frequency and the intensity of that behavior.
Great. You can tell that we wanted to get a lot of input from a lot of people. So that's why we collaborated with a lot of individuals when writing these instruments. But also, we wanted to focus on the stakeholders and those who are most impacted. And that's the client and that's their families. And sometimes we have a difficulty in being able to represent that in an assessment. And so that's really why we wanted to pull the loop in, because we wanted to keep everyone in the loop. We want them to be actively engaged in everything that we're doing, and then also get to see the progress or help us alter that progress or alter the goals in order to see the progress. And we wanted to really address the things that were most impactful in their lives. And that's why we called the MOTAS what we did: Meaningful Outcomes Treatment and Assessment Scale. We wanted to make sure that we were hitting the needs of the families and the clients, especially getting their input. And we also wanted to make sure that this was individualized to their own history and their own growth. We didn't want them to have to be compared to other people. We wanted to celebrate their progress, where they had been, where they are now, and where they're going. And so this is why we created it. And hopefully you'll enjoy it too and find that there are some meaningful goals. So in an article that hopefully a lot of you are familiar with, and if you're not, it'd be really great to read this. I think you'd really enjoy it. But just that first sentence says, I can identify Saturn, but I can't brush my teeth. And there are some treatment plans that are out there that aren't addressing things that are helping individuals to increase independence and improve quality of life, but they're checking a box. We did not want to have any of those types of goals in the MOTAS. We wanted every single one of them to be meaningful and to be something that people are proud to work on and that they're excited to work on. So this was a big guide for us when we were writing the MOTAS in, is this good enough that we want to make sure that we're spending time, valuable resources, and making sure that we're putting and prioritizing our clients and their needs. So these are the components, just some of the components of the MOTAS. Like Casey said, there are 20 domains in the MOTAS, and they were listed before, and they all correlate to the loop so that you can make sure that the needs are getting met in the assessment, and then you know what to do. Like if communication is an area of concern, you can have all of these goals that you can look at and reference in order to make some meaningful progress. And there are almost 1,200 goals in there. It's a lot. So like we were saying, you don't have to do the whole assessment, and you probably shouldn't. There will be certain domains that are more applicable for your client and others that are more applicable later. Like if you were working with a child, like it says, our age span here is from 5 throughout the end of life. If you have a child who is 5 or 6, you're going to want to focus maybe more on communication, more on social skills, more on some of those type of domains rather than the finances or the employment. So you really want to tailor this to what your client needs. Okay, so here are the components of the scoring. We wanted to make this really simple. It's a 0 to 5 scoring throughout the entire assessment. Nothing changes, so you can just plan on this the whole time. 0 means it's not applicable. 1 is a pre-skill. 2 is prompted. 3 is independent. 4 is generalized, and 5 is maintained. Because we wanted to make sure that every goal that was in here was worth maintaining. We wanted to make sure that it was something so valuable that we could come back and check and make sure that later this is something that's being utilized in their day-to-day lives. So here is an example of what one of the scoring sheets would look like. And we decided to choose dressing just to show you. So you'll see there that each number or each goal is numbered, and then there's a list of the goals that gives you the description. And then there are examples of the goals because we want you to individualize those goals. We don't want it to be cookie cutter. Think about how your client needs this goal implemented in their life, and then come up with a plan in order to help them achieve that goal in ways that are individualized to them. So here's something that's also really great is that at the beginning of each of the domains and subdomains, they all have a meaningful outcome listed just for them. So that when you're writing your treatment plan, you can look at what is my overall objective? Why am I actually working on these goals? And you can really think about that. And is that something that is applicable to your learner? And so you'll see here for the social behavior, that meaningful outcome is able to choose to engage in meaningful social interactions, develop friendships with a variety of people, and engage in desired community experiences. You can see how that would be pretty meaningful and something that would be very necessary for clients and their families. And so we wanted to make sure that we focused on that and listed each of those. So there are a lot of meaningful outcomes throughout the whole assessment. All right. Also, one other area that we noticed that was a gap and that's missing in some of the assessments out there is the area of flexibility. We had found that there were a lot of kids that we were working with on really great goals, but in order to get them to be able to work on that goal, we had to work on some flexibility and being able to adapt. And it had taken us a while to be able to meet those goals and get there, but it wasn't being represented in any of the assessments. And so flexibility has put in so that we're able to recognize that life is unpredictable and those unexpected things can happen. And so we wanted to help them be comfortable when things don't go according to plan, and so there's that level of flexibility of being able to bend without breaking. And some people have said, well, isn't flexibility generalization? And it's not. It can be very different. Like we've talked about this several times. If you teach a child, let's put on our socks and shoes, and it always has to be the right sock before the left sock. They might be able to put on their socks at the school, or they might be able to put them on at home or at grandma's house. But what happens when something happens to their routine and we might have to alter it a little bit? We need to make sure that we are able to adapt and be flexible in those unexpected or unpredictable moments. So these are really good. I think you'll really like a lot of those flexibility components. In addition, we added safety into a lot of the domains because we wanted to make sure that safety was a priority. And it looks different for some of those domains, like when we're doing leisure skills, it might be outdoor safety. It might be how to cross the street, making sure that those are safe. But if you look at this one for social skills, it comes down to bullying. So being able, because when you think about safety, it's so broad. And having that in the different domains was very necessary in order to really pinpoint what we would need to learn in those areas. That's also true for problem solving, because problem solving at home with your siblings may look different than when you're problem solving something in the community or when you're problem solving with peers. And so all of the sections that have problem solving, they're very much individualized to that domain. So there are also, after you've done the MOTAS and you've completed the areas that are necessary, there are two types of scoring sheets that are provided. There's the summary of the domain scores that compiles all 20 domains into a big picture view of how your individual is progressing. There are also scoring sheets that include each goal from the assessment to measure progress on the individual skills over time. So you'll see that there are 4 assessments. So you get to track progress, and this is a scoring sheet that you can track over that time where you're able to implement 4 assessments and then compare them to the one before where you can say, hey, great, we're making progress, or what happened? We need to work on this area. But that's what's really nice. And if you're interested in the electronic version, you can also access this there because it will just be a quick little drop down and you can fill in the 0 through 5. And it will also maintain those scores for you and then keep track of them over time. It also includes the MOTAS is great because we not only covered the assessment, but we thought ahead and we wanted to cover a few more areas. So I'll let Casey talk about what this next one is.
Hey, so one of the supplemental materials in the MOTAS is the DSM-5 criteria for autism spectrum disorder. We received special permission from the American Psychological Association to print the DSM criteria in its entirety because many people who are providing behavior analytics services are needing to submit treatment plans and information on progress to insurance companies in order for those services to be paid for. And many payers are requiring that all of the goals are related back to the core characteristics of autism. So this is in here to make sure that everyone is familiar with that criteria and they have that information so that they can tailor their goals to meet the requirements of the payers. In addition to the DSM criteria, we also have the Monroe Phonetic Sound Inventory, which was created by a speech language pathologist just for the MOTAS. It's really easy to use. It's helpful for BCBAs because it goes in the order that sounds are developmentally occurring. So we want to make sure that we're not working on sounds before kids are ready or developmentally able to do that. The motor skills checklist was created by an occupational therapist just for the MOTAS to provide information on what skills develop at different ages and why they're important. This information can be used to identify any skills that might be missing and when to refer out to make sure that we're working within our scope. And sometimes we don't always know when it's time to refer out or what can be handled by an occupational therapist. So this is a really nice guide to let you know and help parents know when it's time to seek additional support. In addition to that, this occupational therapist also created the sensory systems and activities for us. And so this is a bunch of different activities and ideas and ways to develop the different bodily systems and senses. So this can help identify preferred or non-preferred sounds, textures, and smells, and can help individuals be exposed to different sensations that they might see out in the environment so that they're prepared for that. And then it could even help them identify new leisure skills. There's lots of fun different activities in here.
Okay, so you can see that the MOTAS has a lot of different components. We're pulling in interviews from clients, from families, from professionals. We collaborated with SLPs and OTs, and these goals in the MOTAS are intense, and they are a lot, and we are expecting a lot from our clients when we're working on the MOTAS. And so it is our job, and one extra part that we added in that is super important to all of us, I think that work with children and why we got into this field, is there was a study that was done where it says recent publications suggest that ABA should be concerned with soft skills such as collaboration, which we wanted to do and why we got a lot of input from a lot of people, compassionate care, interpersonal skills, and relationship building skills. And in some of these findings, they found that BCBAs weren't always rated highly in their terms, in their ability to interact in a collaborative method or be able to provide services in a compassionate manner. So that's why we really wanted to round out the MOTAS with one other component. And in an article by Wolf in 1978, when parents were asked, what is the most important quality that someone should have when working with your child? They said warmth. And so we had to consider that when thinking about these experiences, that maybe that wasn't always the feeling or the quality that a lot of practitioners or clinicians were showing when they were working with their clients. And so that is when we implemented and created the kindness method. And the kindness method is a list of goals that providers get to work on because we expect so much from our clients. We need to expect a lot from ourselves and recognize that it is such a great privilege to get to work with those in our care. I want you to think about this quote really quick that was shared with me by a parent. My child is not a car. One time I was in a meeting and it felt like they were testing him the same way they would a car, checking the battery, testing the brakes, and diagnosing the engine with horrible problems. He was a checklist of what needed to be fixed. He is an amazing person. He's not going to end up in a junkyard. He's an amazing human with a human being with possibilities, feelings, and a future. He's my whole world. I think that that is what we need to focus on and what we need to remember is that when we're utilizing this assessment, that it's not a checklist. It's not something where somebody has deficits, where they're not doing enough, where they're not good enough. It's something where we get to come in and we get to celebrate and acknowledge how much value this person has and how important they are. So over the decades, because I've worked with a lot of parents, I've had two questions that have come to me. And the first one is, what will my child's future look like and how will others treat my child? And I think this is a concern for all parents. I think we all worry about this, but I think there's increased concerns for parents who have children who require additional support. And so when we were creating the MOTAS, we wanted to make sure that we were addressing both of these questions because they have been pressing and they have been asked to me for years. And I wanted to give some hope. And so that's why the first one, what will my child's future look like? That's why we developed the MOTAS. We wanted to be able to help create futures with increased independence and improved quality of life, where people get to feel successful and they get to work on goals that matter, that are impactful for families, and for them to get to be contributing, valued members of society. The other one was, how are people going to treat my child? And that's where the kindness method comes in, because our greatest privilege as clinicians is getting to work with these clients, and they get to be treated with kindness. So we developed the kindness method, and there are goals for each of us that we can always work on. Now, this is going to be a long-term progress. You're not going to be able to master all these. Maybe some of you can. Maybe some of you are really good and you've already mastered all these. But this is something that we can work on and that can be an ongoing process. And that there are goals in these 5 areas where it's displaying kindness, grateful thinking, hopeful thinking, identifying and using strengths, and savoring positive experiences. So before you get to start with this kindness method, it's a really great idea to kind of evaluate, like, where are we as far as implementing kindness in our treatment? And so there's an initial questionnaire that gives you just a little overview of how you're implementing it and how you're valuing that in your practice. After that, the next step is evaluating the provider goals. Now, you need to know kindness is multifaceted. It is bringing our very best self to those we serve, but also having high expectations and seeking those true, meaningful outcomes in ways that promote growth and affirm worth. So within the kindness method, you'll see that there are 36 goals for providers to evaluate themselves on. Because like I said, we expect change from our clients, so why not ourselves? So some of the goals include expressing gratitude to clients and coworkers, collaboration with other professionals, being on time, and creating opportunities for sharing joy. Can you imagine how much rapport building or how much better it would feel if our clients knew how grateful we were for them and that we were grateful for their contributions and we were grateful for their families? We've noticed that just by expressing that gratitude, that it changes a lot of our relationships and helps people to feel like we really value them and care about them. So when you look through the kindness method, you'll find some goals that probably really resonate with you and that you're like, hey, that might be something that I'd like to work on. And so there's a list right here of goal development on where you can choose up to 3 of the areas and the goals that you want to work with. And we've done this in a lot of different ways. We've done it as far as like our whole staff training on a company level. We've done it in ways where we've shared it with parents that they can have this expectation of, when your child is in our care, these are the things that you can expect. And then we've also done it in supervisory experiences where we've been able to utilize this so that we can focus on how are we implementing kindness as leaders in our company. So this is what's really great too, is that once you've worked through these goals and you've chosen them and you've decided to prioritize, there are so many benefits to implementing principles of the kindness method. They are vast and varied. There are a few that are listed, and I want you to know that many of these behaviors can be observed and measured, and some can't, but these are those that can. And there are benefits to both the provider and the learner in the areas of social benefits, emotional benefits, personal growth and development, physical benefits, and financial benefits in all of these areas. And you might find some of them surprising, because did you know that when you treat people with kindness, and it's one of these here, that you alleviate other people's suffering? that there's less burnout, there's greater work satisfaction, there's increased expression of gratitude from your clients and your coworkers. We have improved quality of health and physical health. And there's even an increase in clients wanting to pay their bills in full and on time. So you can recognize that kindness impacts all areas of our practice and our lives. And there's research that goes to back this up. It's not just something that feels really good, even though it does, but it has real benefits to us and to those who we're providing services for. So those are all of the components of the loop and the MOTAS and the scoring. And it's really meant to make a full picture and show all of the impacts on everything from, the very first minute that you meet your client until you're providing therapy and you're working through everything. And so hopefully you find all of this helpful. Hopefully there are really beautiful, meaningful outcomes. And we really enjoyed making it. So if you'd like to purchase it, you can go to Different Roads to Learning. That's their website right there. And if you want the kindness method just for free, you can have that too at abaeducationcenter.com and utilize that however you'd like. That is there. It's accessible for you to be able to utilize in your practice, and just take advantage of that however you need to. Anyway.
And if you have any questions about the MOTAS, how to use it, anything like that, reach out to us. We're happy to help, and we'd love to meet you and talk to you about it.
Yeah, we love it. We love talking about it. And we love meeting you. Okay. Thanks for listening.